and welcome to Legally Speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. In India, we have many politicians who can do politics, but very few politicians who can write policy for the ministry, for the industry, and for the country at large, and frame laws. Our guest today is in the select league of such gentlemen. He is one of India's most sought-after lawyers, an eminent jurist, a distinguished parliamentarian, and a sitting Rajya Sabha MP. He is a thinker, an author, and a commentator. Mr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, welcome to Legally Speaking.
Thank you.
So, as our guest in today's Up Close and Personal series, we will go back to the very beginning, to your childhood, to the time when you were born. Could you share with us some anecdotes in the early years of your childhood, say from 3 years to 5 years to 7 years?
Well, I was born in Jodhpur, the largest town in western Rajasthan. Jodhpur has a great tradition of food. Vegetarian food is the acme, the highest form perhaps, just like Vazwan is known for non-vegetarian food in Kashmir. It has great emphasis on a very high form of speech, a tremendous disproportionate emphasis on education. You'll be surprised to know that almost every year there's a topper or the second or the third number in chartered accountancy, and the maximum number of qualifiers are from Jodhpur. It's a laid-back, lazy, beautiful town, a lot of history, but and Jodhpuris are doing very well all over the place. But that old traditional concept of development in a fierce, cutthroat competition way, no, it's not there. It's got lots of personal touch and all that. In that, I was born in 1959. I remember that our family was in difficult circumstances, living in a relatively small flat. The notable events of my childhood were, one, that everybody tells me, even the shopkeepers today, there, that I was a very naughty child who would run to the veranda and drop utensils, which is A, very tough on a economically straitened family, and B, very tough on the passers-by below. But Jodhpur being what it is, the shopkeepers were gallant enough to frequently bring it back all the way up. I distinctly remember a very fierce illness in my third and a half year. And I'm speaking candidly, this is exactly This is what I've written elsewhere also. And I was kind of given up for lost, and I remember visions of a figure flitting around in the room with a bansuri, which is the closest analog I had ever at that age of Krishna. And I did recover after those visions. Otherwise, notably as far as childhood is concerned, we left Jodhpur really at 4 and a half, because my father was elected to the Lok Sabha from that. So the third and the most lasting memory of Jodhpur is as a just under 4-year-old person on the shoulders of someone, speaking in halting Rajasthani, Takdi ko vote do. Takdi is the Rajasthani Marwari equivalent of scales of justice, which was my father's election symbol. So they were, using me once in a while to speak those things, and that is a very distinct memory in me. But otherwise, Jodhpur is something which not only have I represented Rajasthan for 12 long years, but in Parliament, but I otherwise go back frequently to Jodhpur, and the connection remains long-lasting. My wife is from Jodhpur. The small part of my in-laws' family lives there, and Jodhpur is something which is, once you're a Jodhpuri, you don't ever quite like any other town as your grassroots more than Jodhpur.
Okay, and let's move ahead. 4 and a half, 4 and a half, you come to Delhi and you take admission. Which school did you go to at that point, or where did you get admitted first?
Yes, we, of course, since my father was a young 29-year-old Lok Sabha MP, our Member of Parliament houses were 99 South Avenue flat.
South Avenue flats.
And then a lovely house in 19 Janpath, which was just next to what was then a petrol pump.
Okay.
And now is just next to Meridian Hotel. There was no Meridian in those days.
Okay.
I went to St. Columbus School. I'm a die-hard Columban. For a couple of reasons, I did 12 years there, from KG to 11th. As you know, we had only 11th. We didn't have 12th in those days. But also because I was a very good student all through. And ultimately, I topped Columbus. I topped the whole Indian school certificate system, of which Columbus was a part. But Columbus has been the school. And in those days, I'm sorry to say, Columbus was a remarkable school. It is not the same today. And I'm not just talking of wistful thinking. It was the #1 school in the Indian school certificate or senior Cambridge system which we used to follow. And it had all those top schools, Doon and Mayo and all the St. Joseph's and all, 200 schools in India. And yet Columbus academically was right out there in the forefront. It has declined, I'm sorry to say, but those were glorious years.
Okay. And how would you remember yourself as somebody, because since you have this academic bent of mind, were you quiet and sober, introverted? What would be the nomenclature that comes to your mind when you look at yourself going back then?
Different nomenclatures if you were to ask some other people who may have a different image, and different if you ask me. My own nomenclature for myself is largely, almost entirely an introvert.
Is it?
Yes. In fact, I consider that even now, but to a lesser degree. But then certainly, be always self-critical beyond reason sometimes. And thirdly, a very diligent, hard-working student. That third characteristic, I think all my teachers and everybody else would affirm. And I, because of that, stood always first or second in my sections from KG onwards, right up to the 8th, and then we branched out and then onwards. But school was a glorious period because, in a sense, I've never done as well as I've done in school, because you can't do better than topping.
Yes.
So therefore, it is a very fond memory. And also, we should stay for 12 years there. And you have things like your name up in the school roll of honor as having topped India. I topped India in my school leaving exams. So, and then, a rare moment of pride in school is when I was asked to deliver the annual day speech. We used to have as children the entire school lined up on the lawns, and some chief guest would come, and a student would be made to give that annual speech, and then of course the chief guest would thank the school. So that is a rare honor for us.
I would want to ask you that you, if we know it correctly, were selected for a scholarship to go abroad after your school, right after your school.
Yes, it was virtually in those days automatic that if you topped India,
yes,
there was a little known thing called OPOS, Fellowship or Scholarship, which was basically given to the Indian School Certificate topper, subject to other things. And it enabled you to go to England then and there. And you'd end up, doing the A-levels and then doing the university there.
Yes.
And it would have been a good thing for me to do in many normal ways. But I think at that time I was really, really even more introvert than I thought of myself.
Easy.
And my parents, of course, thought that to lose a son so early on, he'll never probably come back to India. So all in all, it was something available on a platter, and I never took it, which is for study in Britain straight after school, which is now, of course, much more common.
But I want to understand a thing from you. Somebody who tops 250 schools in India in those days, gets a scholarship to go abroad and study, refuses it. In retrospect, how would you see that decision?
It's difficult to say because God has been kind, life has been kind. I have done well thereafter as well. And I went to the same place I would have gone then, ultimately, that is Cambridge. In retrospect, I think for me it was a good decision. Okay. Today I would not say that you should spurn an offer like that.
Yes.
But for me, because I had a great time in Stephens, which I went to instead of going abroad then. And I think I became more firmly connected to India by doing university here, in some sense.
And so Stephanians in India are a class of people by themselves, and each has done well in diplomacy, politics, law. What was it, you refused a scholarship to go to Stephens, so not to
Stephens, to go abroad.
To go abroad.
After school.
No, to go abroad after school, but you refused a scholarship and then you went to Stephens.
Yes, because
so
I had to study in India thereafter.
I wouldn't say that was a climb down, but of course you refused something much.
Well, let me say this, Tarun. There was a period in the 70s, roughly I would say 73, 4 till early 80s. These are periods which have no explanation.
Yes.
When Stephens Economics Honours was considered the ultimate.
Is it?
Yeah. It was the Mecca and the Medina and the ultimate pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. I mean, it's difficult to believe now, but I would in retrospect say that it was more sought after than an IIT degree, more sought after than an IIM, and it has just attained that for that 1 decade period. Now, in that time, our batch, again, partly, I don't think so much to do with Stephens, but the fact that they already had a reputation, very snooty, so they chose only the toppers first from all across, the West Bengal board topper, the All India High Secondary board topper, the Senior Cambridge topper, etc. And then when they filled up the classes with those, then they went to the number 2s of the same boards. So anyway, the input was of such high quality.
Yes.
But I must say that, again, and I don't ascribe it to any brilliance as such, because I always find so many brilliant youngsters around us. The people I interview are usually far better and brilliant than me who's interviewing them. That's the truth about the youngsters we have now. But the batch I was in Economics Honours St. Stephens, which is a very reputed course, has done very well for itself. I mean, our classmates, and many of us are not in touch. We had a recent reunion where some of us met, but include Dhananjaya Chandrachud, Sanjay Kishan Kaul, feedback is Vinayak Chatterjee.
Yes.
Arvind Subramaniam, the former chief economic advisor. Ajay Pal Singh Banga, the world head of MasterCard.
Okay. He's a...
Ivan Menezes, the world head of Diageo.
Oh.
I can't remember, there's so many other names.
Maybe Jayant Nath.
Jayant Nath, Judge of the High Court. KP Krishnan is Secretary to the Government of India.
Yes.
There's a long list of people.
Okay.
And it was, I think one of those fantastic batches. Many of us are in touch. And therefore you can understand why Stephens was a much sought after course. But it's not so after that decade. It's not the same degree.
You mean 70s were different, clearly.
70s and early 80s, clearly.
So, we also gathered that you also even were a topper, one among the toppers in Stephens also. You continued
we
that?
had 3 years.
Yes.
Manjeev Singh Puri, the name I forgot to mention, the current ambassador to Nepal.
Yes.
And would have been at one time a contender for foreign secretary.
Yes.
In the first year, you used to be marked out of 150.
Okay.
And there was a 131, and then Manjeev got 130 out of 150, and I got 129. Okay. So I was 3rd in the university rankings, not in the college, university.
Yes.
But I think in 3rd year, the overall average, Dhananjay beat everybody.
Yes.
And I was respectable. I was like 4th or 5th in the university of like 50 colleges. So it's a good thing. But we were all very good students. It's a select band. And of course, we were ahead in degree markings than all the other names I've taken, who were all very bright. Yes. But in life, so many have done well in different spheres.
Yes.
In economics, in World Bank, in IMF, in bureaucracy, in industry. We have 2 world heads in one batch alone of 2 top corporates.
So that's the kind of illustriousness you talk about.
And very humble batch. Some of them were there at a recent reunion for the first time. And absolutely, no airs. And that's, I think, they have to deal with certain different situations, but when you are in your private life, they're very simple, very nice people, most of them.
And if I may ask you, you were a student with an academic bent of mind who topped all through school, and you were among the toppers in college. Did you change track because the kind of arguments you do today before court? Were you a debater in college? Because
now, that's an interesting transformation of an introvert. Incidentally, I still consider myself an introvert. I'm not a very social being, so in that sense an introvert, and yet a good communicator.
Yes.
So I don't know how to pinpoint the change, but I think when I was given some speaking assignments as a mark of honor for being a good student in school, that started changing. That was the annual speech I talked about.
Okay.
And then in college, I opened up definitely because of 2 things. One, we had a very good man in debating, somewhat of a maverick and eccentric, who unfortunately passed away, Vinod Chaudhary, who's probably the best debater I've come across. He was a person who would just light up when it came to debates. And he could speak on anything. He was the kind of guy who said, right now I throw a coin and speak on a potato is a potato is a potato. He could hold you enthralled for 10 minutes on that subject. And he could speak against the motion or for the motion, depending on what you told him. So he was the head of our debating team, and he encouraged some of us. So we did a college kind of team for the college. That encouraged and opened me up. Also, I fought a student election and lost it in the Students' Council of St. Stephens.
You first brushed with politics?
well, a kind, it's a college based, because Stephens was not integrated with the university. So it was within the intra-college.
Yes.
I was also the secretary of the Planning Forum, a very respectable society of St. Stephen's, which still continues till today.
Okay.
And I remember that Dr. Manmohan Singh was a speaker at one of our functions. At that time, he was not in politics, and nor was I in politics in any manner, and of course, a long age gap. But those things helped. And then when I went to Cambridge, shortly after that, for the first 3 months in Cambridge, I was a very active debater, because I wanted to make it in the Cambridge Union. And I got a paper speech in my first term, which meant I had a future. A paper speech is a mark of honor given to somebody but I left it after the first term, because I found that either I had to perform reasonably well for the money being spent on my education, or be taken up by debating, and I couldn't do both. So I think there again I backed off. But I have done a lot of debating from roughly the 79 to 84 odd period.
Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi just shared with us his brush with arbitration and how he was involved in drafting the act virtually
in
later.
that sense, because he consulted me on telephone and otherwise at that time.
Yes, so your inputs were taken.
Yes.
And there was also the talk of the Wollund arbitration that you were involved with. Could you share briefly?
I led the Government of India arbitration, and this was my first full-length arbitration trial in London.
Your first, and this was way back in 91?
This was in the mid-90s.
Mid-90s.
Early 90s, after 91 and before 94.
Okay.
And that was another fascinating thing. The person who was opposing me was a British QC.
Okay.
And I was a non-designated senior, who subsequently became a judge of the High Court, one of the most famous arbitration judges. And that was another fascinating experience with the discipline of international arbitration, which in those days, in a real-life situation in England, was new for an Indian lawyer.
Okay.
And I have written an interesting piece, how my evolution as a counsel is intertwined with the arbitration law history of India in the Arbitration Law Journal, which recounts these incidents in sequence.
Okay, and this Wollund arbitration was for a plant in Timarpur, was it?
Yes, it was a funny thing.
Yes.
The Indian government bought a plant which the Danish sold them on the basis that in all over Europe, this dirty garbage is incinerated, produces power. So on the one hand, you incinerate garbage, and you also generate power, kills two birds with one stone. And everybody was gaga about it, and everybody rightly would be. And India bought it.
Yes.
One small little thing they forgot, that the quality of garbage in India is far inferior to the quality of garbage in Denmark.
That's an interesting thing.
So the damn garbage here would not incinerate. It did not have what they call a calorific value.
Yes, yes.
So the dispute arose whether they would bear it or we would bear it. And of course, nobody had thought of it earlier. So we had a very bad case. We hadn't put in the right clauses, and we lost the arbitration.
Okay. We'll take a very different aspect of your life. We're talking of your international forays into arbitration. You later you've said also publicly, you never have visited Cambridge as in, very frequently, but you have instituted a 2 crore fellowship there.
There's a long gap, because I got busy and busier here.
Yes.
And I really, don't look back in that sense. I wish I had been more in touch with Cambridge. I very rarely went back to America, except once in a while for touristy purposes.
Yes.
But last year, 17, I have donated over 2 crore Indian rupees from what you can call the LRS funds remittance, which you allow.
Okay.
Which had started a Singhvi Trinity Fellowship.
Okay.
Which will roughly every other year try and support an Indian student, preferably in law, at the undergraduate or the 1-year postgraduate program. It is now going to be starting in a bigger way. And I was very happy to interact with Professor Gregory Winters, who got the Nobel Prize now this year.
Is it?
He's the master of Trinity, the head of Trinity. And it was under his collaboration that we started it.
Okay.
And my corpus is there. And Trinity has also agreed to top up the little bit required sometimes to top up the annual.
Okay.
So
that is your contribution to furthering the cause.
Now there's a regular Singhvi Trinity Fellowship.
Yes. It's a regular Singhvi Trinity Fellowship, and every year an Indian student will be able to go study there, all because Dr. Singhvi has instituted that scholarship. And that's your contribution and a tribute in a sense to your university and also to the students of India who aspire to go and study there, who are not as privileged.
Thank you. Yes.
And we will in a sense now go to the golden years of your profession. The 91 to 2002 was when you grew maximum, they say, the kind of strides you took in the profession. Say, in 91, you would have been about 32 years old, thereabouts.
Yes.
And you would have had a practice of say about 7-8 years by then. And how things started to change? Could you just in about
when my father left in 91 for the High Commissioner,
yes,
I had a private conversation with him where I said, it's all very well for you to go, but a lot of my contemporaries have their parents working. He said a very strange and a very somber thing. He said, according to me, Abhishek, your practice should double and increase after I leave and because I leave, not because I'm here. So I laughed it off. I said, this is all easy to say. Anyway, he did not really come back to practice after 91 in a bigger way. But I found that his words were prophetic. My practice doubled every year from 91. Some years it trebled over the previous year, each year after 91. In 93, I had the privilege of being declared India's youngest senior advocate.
I must tell my viewers this. Viewers, there is a legend in Delhi and an anecdote in Delhi circles. People say benchmark their achievements by the time Dr. Singhvi got his senior designation from the court. He got it at the young age of 34. So it's discussed. You may not know, but it's widely discussed.
Yes, I was doing, in fact, it's interesting, the Renu Sagar case was going on in June in the holidays in the Supreme Court,
yes,
when I got information that the Delhi High Court had designated me.
Yes.
And that was a great, great privilege, but the privilege means that you get an edge, yes, in your life, but when you have to stand up very soon after that and face the Fali Narimans and the Soli Sorabjis on the other side,
yes,
as a senior. So, and you have to stand on your own two little feet, and there's nothing much between you and your hard work the previous night. I was further even more privileged in being made a Additional Solicitor General in 1997 at age 37.
Yes.
And both these were very scary, very difficult, very enjoyable and very solid experiences which made me stand up and face the best, the brightest, the worst moments, the difficult moments.
Yes.
And you realize that there is nothing except hard work which stands you in good stead. And that's, I think, a very important message to every young lawyer.
You've spoken about the Bargad analogy many times, that sometimes when you're missing the absence of your father, but still you grew.
Could be. Well, people say, I mean, I don't know the real reason, but people say Bargad analogy means that other plants are not really allowed to grow within the shadow of a Bargad tree, the Bargad tree, the banyan tree.
So using the absence of your father...
My father was a giant in the profession. He was a giant of a man otherwise. So that could have been the reason till he went to England. I don't know. But this is what he said. This is what he felt.
He felt that he was proud to see
his departure would enhance my law practice, yes, which was, I thought, a very funny and a very sad thing for him to say.
Yes.
But he did say it. And it turned out to be true.
So very interestingly, as we bring our episode 3 of Up Close and Personal with eminent jurist Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi to a close, what we see is 93, at the young age of 34, he becomes empaneled as a senior advocate. 97, he is already Additional Solicitor General. How did life change after becoming ASG? We will discuss in episode 4 of Up Close and Personal with Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi. Thank you viewers for watching this episode. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.